Cast your mind back to the summer of '75, a blockbuster, Steven Spielberg. Now think of the music. Just when you thought it was safe to go back into the water, not Jaws, but Coots. To be honest, I can't see it winning an Oscar or grossing millions of dollars. So let's get on with Springwatch. Hello, and welcome to the penultimate Springwatch of 2023. And the sun is still shining. But before we get into the programme, firstly, thanks to Neil Phillips for that remarkable shot of the coot taking the dragonfly.
I think it is Oscar awarding. I'd give the little coot chick a nomination for supporting cast, supporting actor.
Cracking piece of camera work.
Yeah,
Thank you very much, Neil, for that. Now, we have plenty of things to pack into tonight's programme, of course, coming from here in Arn. But Gillian is going to be reporting on a bird which is very close to her Cornish heart. Megs is out and about, and she's going to introduce you to the UK's longest-lived caterpillar. Pretty good stuff, but I've got something for you.
Go on then.
I was lying in bed this morning, checking out on the phone. I found something extraordinarily interesting.
Oh, yeah?
The world's oldest bird's nest.
Yep.
So go on, in the UK, what do you think the oldest
it's
nest?
got to be a bird of prey, something like a golden eagle. I mean, hundreds and hundreds of years, I would have thought.
Golden eagles will return to a series of nests and use them over tens, if not hundreds of years. But this nest has just been discovered by scientists in South America. It's an Andean condor's nest. It's 2,200 years old.
Seriously?
Yeah, and I was very excited about that, so I thought I'd do a bit more research, and then I found that the University of Oxford sent some scientists out to Greenland in 2009 and found a Gaia falcon's nest that was 2,740 years old.
Astonishing stuff. And that is what Chris Packham does in bed before breakfast.
Quarter past six this morning. That was tickling my fancy, I can tell you. Extraordinary, absolutely amazing. Should we get on with the show?
Yeah, I think we should. Let's have a look at our live nests. This is our remaining cast of characters, and I'm going to take you to one that we haven't really looked at recently because, well, they're doing remarkably well, and it's our oyster catchers. These are the chicks, no longer in their nest because, well, they fledged. And as I say, 2 chicks doing remarkably well, and I'm pleased to say, very much still alive.
Indeed. Well, if you remember, we had 6 eggs in that nest. Now, we thought that was down to egg dumping. So 2 females had laid their eggs in the same place. One of them was incubating. She hatched 2 of the eggs, and these are the resulting young. They're out and about, curiously pecking at anything, trying to find their own food. Adults are doing a great job of keeping the predators away. We've had herons down there. We've had a seagull down there at one point, but luckily it didn't spot them. In the meantime, they're furtively searching for food. They'll be providing food for these young waders, not just until they can fly, but for several months to come, until their beaks mature, so they're big enough and strong enough to break into their shellfish food. But look, as soon as a worm appears, it's first come, first serve. It's a race to get to the worm. And just that the last one falls over and doesn't get the worm. Lesson learned there. Lovely little chicks, very long-legged, strong, long legs at this point, because that running is really important, not just chasing the parents to find food, of course, but responding to any alarm calls they produce, indicating that there are potential predators, and they scuttle off into the undergrowth as quickly as possible.
Oh, they're really lovely, and it really warms my heart, because I must say, out of all the chicks that we've seen, I was worried about those because there are so many predators around and they're ground nesting and they're still so tiny, but they're
on
still
island,
with us.
So they've got that going for them.
Yeah.
At least the foxes can't get, well,
we've seen badgers before, so let's not go there, shall we? Now, do you know, a question I get asked a lot is, why is Springwatch so late? Well, part of the reason is you don't want to be watching just birds sitting on eggs. We want to see chicks. And just to prove that we're not late, I'm going to show you our stone chat nest, because there it is, and we've got the female sitting there, and the female is feeding tiny chicks that only hatched on Monday. And this is what we've seen of them both. We've seen them out and about, both the male and the female. That's the female, and that's the male with that gorgeous rusty chest and black head, coming in with caterpillars for what we think are 4 chicks. There were 5 eggs in there, and as I say, we know they hatched on Monday, but we've only seen 4 tiny little beaks come out. I say both parents have been very diligent and both going in. And you know what? We're not going to see whether those chicks are successful or not because the programme finishes tomorrow. So my prediction is all 4 of them will go into the future and, Chris, live happily ever after. And that could be the end of that story.
Well, you can keep everything cost for that, of course. We have been on Springwatch this week, you'll know. It's our cuckoo that we've been looking at. And we go live now, not to the cuckoo's nest, of course, but to the meadow pipit's nest where it was incumbent. And you can see that it's not there. Yes, earlier today, it scuttled away for the final time, we think, the meadow pipit's nest. It had clearly outgrown it. So first thing this morning, it decides to break out into the surrounding vegetation. Now, it's not sat on top of a bush quite yet. It's been so hot here today. I think, to be honest with you, it's been finding shelter down in the undergrowth. Pipits came back, noticed that it'd gone, but of course it didn't take them long to find it. It was begging like mad. And here you can see those adults ducking down to feed the cuckoo. It's moved about 5 metres, and we spoke to Charles Tyler from the University of Exeter, who studied cuckoo fledging for some time, and he says that within 8 to 10 days, these young birds can move up to 500 metres or more, so it won't be hanging around for much longer.
Although the parents will feed it for a while, won't they? They'll continue to feed it. But what happens after that? Well, that remarkable bird in September will make its migration all the way down to the Congo in Africa. And you know what? Not very much was known about their migration routes until 2011, when the BTO set up a team led by Chris Hewson, and they tagged nearly 100 cuckoos. It's an ongoing project, so they continue to tag these cuckoos. And what they've seen is that they migrate in 2 routes. Now, the English ones, which is our cuckoo, the ones that hatched in England, will come down this route through Spain and through Morocco down to... Oh, he's gone upside down.
Hold on. My cuckoo's gone a little bit. Oh, no, he's...
It's a novice. It's his first flight. Comes all the way down. Come on, get your act together. Get your
with the magnet. Oh, look.
OK, anyway, so the English ones go down this western route here. The ones that hatch in Scotland take a slightly longer route through Italy and the Balkans, and they come down to the Congo and join their English mates. But what was interesting was this route is longer, and yet from the records that they've got, there was a 97% success rate for cuckoos that took that route, 56% success rate for this shorter route. So, well, I thought this out. Chris, why would that be?
Well, there are several clues. The first thing is there's been quite a significant decline in cuckoos in the English population. They're down by 71% in recent times, whereas the Scottish population, those that take the longer route, actually have increased by 31%. So there's a disparity there. The other thing they discovered was that these cuckoos following the western route were dying before they endured the hardest part of their journey, crossing the Sahara Desert. But they were dying before that very, very difficult crossing. And the last thing they discovered was that the English cuckoos were staying in the UK for 8 days longer than their counterparts in Scotland. So they stay longer, they perish before the crossing. All of this is leading to the fact that food might be a clue here. Now, we know that when cuckoos are in the UK, they're feeding on the caterpillars of large moth species, things like egger moths, drinker moths, fox moths, those which are covered with hairs which make them unpalatable to other birds. And we equally know there's been a significant decline in larger moths in England in recent times. And we equally, very sadly, know that that decline is 4 times greater for the moth species that the cuckoos are eating. So this seems to indicate that they're simply not getting enough food, post-breeding in the UK to build up the reserves to get all the way back down here, certainly to cross the Sahara. Now, there may be other factors involved. There have been droughts in southern Europe. Of course, that would mean less caterpillars there as well. But we've certainly got to spend more effort looking after the cuckoos in England. What are the problems driving those moths down? Usual culprits, I'm afraid, industrial agriculture. Too much grazing, too much draining, poor management of hedgerows, and way too many pesticides, of course.
It's interesting stuff though, isn't it? And as I say, the BTO have got more tags on more cuckoos, and you can follow their progress on their website. You can find out details about that through our website. You can even follow the one that Chris lost the magnet to, and he went all the way down to the Antarctica.
Yeah,
Look at that. Look at that.
Sorry, yeah.
Anyway, let's join Gillian. She's in Wales. Have you seen where she is?
I haven't.
It looks absolutely gorgeous. It's South Stack's Cliffs. And look at that lighthouse. Gillian, that looks really lovely.
It is absolutely stunning here, absolutely. We are on South Stack, on the Isle of Anglesey. We're spoilt for choice. The whole coastline right there around the island is absolutely amazing. We've been exploring loads. Last night we were on a much more sheltered spot. We were on Kemlyn Bay. Now that's on the north coast, beautiful shingle beach there. But tonight we've headed out west. We've gone to the most westerly point of Anglesey, to this RSPB Nature Reserve of South Stack. Behind me, it's the Irish Sea. Next stop is Dublin. It just feels like the end of the edge of the world. It's absolutely beautiful here. Now, as you would expect from an RSPB reserve with sea cliffs, seabirds are a really important feature here. You can certainly hear them and we can see them. We've got live cameras right now down there on the seabird colony. Thousands and thousands of birds crowded there, rammed. There's lots of guano, that's the droppings. It's raucous. But there are also some more peaceful scenes when you get up above the cliffs. We've seen some ravens drifting past the lighthouse there. Really beautiful scenes here. Now, like I said, there are loads of summer visitors, seabirds nesting here. We've seen puffin come in with beaks full of sand eels and sprats for their chicks. Also the guillemots, lots of guillemots here. They're in fact the predominant species here. Fulmar, there's Fulmar here. This is a member of the petrel family, really interesting bird. And of course, razorbills. 1,800 razorbills, but like I said, the guillemots are the absolute dominant species here. There's 13,800 of them at the last count of the guillemots. Now, all those birds are supremely adapted to life on a cliff edge. There are plenty of challenges, as I'm sure you can imagine, but there is one challenge that might be a little unexpected, and you've got to take a look at this place at night, the sea view, looking out from South Stack under a starry night sky. Now, this is a beautiful time-lapse shot of this, not enhanced, and this is what you see from South Stack, this belt of horizon there dipping down the horizon. Now, you can get those sort of views here because there's not that much light pollution. It's very far away from cities and towns. However, if we look at that again, you'll notice something there. Now, if you look carefully along the horizon, from left to right, it goes from blue to orange, an orange glow on the right-hand side of that horizon. Now, that isn't a sunset, that is been identified as the city lights glow from Dublin. And imagine Dublin is over 65 miles as the puffin flies, if you like, out in that direction. So these distant lights can affect the seabirds here in all sorts of ways, particularly the night-flying birds, birds like the Manx shearwaters. Now, Manx shearwaters do nest on Anglesey. The adults will come out at night, they're burrow nesting birds, and they'll come out under the cover of night and fly out to sea to forage under the safety of that darkness. So the adults will know not to fly to the light, but for some reason the sub-adults, the juveniles, are attracted to those city lights. And when they get to Dublin, quite often they become grounded, they don't fly again, and then they're very vulnerable to predation. So what can places like South Stack do? Well, very simple, they can just turn off the lights. So lots of nature reserves in Wales are now starting to try and tackle this issue of light pollution. And Wales is certainly leading the way of dark sky reserves. There are 21 dark sky reserves worldwide, and 2 of them are in Wales, in Eryri National Park in Banau Brycheiniog, that's Snowdonia, and the Brecon Beacons. So really punching above its weight in tackling the light pollution around these nature reserves. Of course, it benefits the wildlife, but it's great for astrophotographers as well. Just take a look at some of these shots that have been taken here in Anglesey. So really were lovely scenes here, but also shots of the aurora borealis. Can you imagine seeing that with nature all around you? And certainly things like the Milky Way are visible as well. So like I said, all of this is to the benefit of wildlife, but also to us as well. Megs, I don't know about you, but the thought of being under a starry sky and feeling how small you are under an infinite universe, come on, what could be better than that?
Yeah, I totally agree, Gillian. Sometimes it really puts things into perspective when you see a truly dark sky. It's quite rare in the UK because of that light pollution, but it is amazing when you get to see it. But it always shows, you know, how much difference we can make here on our own planet, and what a beautiful planet it is. Now today I'm back down at RSPBR and I'm on the search for things that are miniature. And I've come out to the woodland habitat. There's gorgeous oak trees, there's ash trees, there's some birch behind and lots of tall bracken. And it's home to so much wildlife. We sent our wildlife team out and they particularly noticed activity around one oak tree. Now this, of course, is a grey squirrel and it's licking the honeydew made by aphids off. But trees also produce their own sweet fermented mixture, and of course that is sap. Now in the springtime, the sap level in trees rise. It's a mixture of nutrients and water, and it attracts all kinds of invertebrate life. We've got an amazing hornet here, a robust insect taking a drink, getting most of that energy. Beautiful red admiral butterflies as well. I've seen a couple darting around today, enjoying that fermented sugar, but speckled wood too. Lots of flies really enjoy that sap. It's really important when you get those kind of invertebrate life, you get lots of birds too. But what I've come to this particular tree is because there is something lurking beneath the bark. Now have a look at these holes here. Now these are left by the caterpillar of the goat moth. Now these are fantastic animals that live in amongst the trees for about 3 to 4 years until they are mature enough to turn themselves into adults. Here you can see those holes really clearly. They make these circular pathways in the tree, and as they get older they go further into the tree itself. They act a little bit like beetles. They don't consume leaves as normal caterpillars do, they consume the wood. But, oh look, red admiral just flew past my hat. Oh look, how lovely is that? I'm disturbing its sap drinking. Look at that, beautiful. But this goat moth will basically work its way in. But let's have a look at the caterpillar itself, because this is a very long caterpillar. It gets to about 10 centimetres. You can see how colourful it is. And I know what you're thinking. Why is it called a goat moth? It's not as if it's got a goatee or anything like that. Well, it's not an acronym for the greatest thing. It's not anything like that. It's because apparently goat moths smell of goats, well, particularly male goats. I don't know where that came from. I have seen a goat moth and I didn't smell it. And I will forever regret that because that will be an unanswered question. But I happen to have some specimens here from Bristol Museum. You can see a caterpillar here. It's not quite 10 centimetres in length, but it is really quite beautiful and intricate. And once this reaches kind of sexual maturity, we're ready to pupate under the ground, it will come out of the tree and work its way down to the soil, where it will kind of pupate, cover itself in that really important silky material, where it will be over the course of the winter. Now when it comes to spring and summer, the adults emerge like this, and they can have a wingspan of up to 9.5 centimetres, and they are one of the rarest moths that we have here in Britain. Very sadly, since the 1960s, they have been under severe decline due to the use of insecticides and of course the way that we manage our woodlands as well. So there's always something we can do to protect our moth species, to keep them as, you know, populated densely as possible, to really care for them. Now, later on in the programme, I am going to be talking about another miniature, and I'm not going to tell you what it is just yet. I'd love you to listen to this. Have a listen now. I've never heard it before. Very unusual. If you think you know the answer to what that might be, please do get in touch with us on our social media, and I will reveal all a little bit later on. Now, as I said, this moth species very sadly is in decline, and there's lots we can do to look after our moths by planting proper food for them in our gardens and taking care. Now, Everyone can get involved in helping wildlife, and some do it to an amazing level, including this amazing gentleman who really loves to help his swifts.
Deep in the heart of the Cambridgeshire countryside, retired salesman John Stimson, known locally as the Swift Man, is eagerly awaiting the arrival of his favourite bird.
I've got one here. First ones of the year. They've made it back. Fantastic. Thrilled to bits. I shall go to bed tonight a very, very happy man. I've seen my first swifts of the year. Brilliant.
Every year, swifts migrate to the UK from Africa, arriving in the spring, staying long enough to breed. Pairs mate for life and return to the same nesting site year on year. But between 1995 and 2020, the UK saw a decline of up to 60% of the common swift population.
When I was a child, the village that I lived in, there were a lot of colonies of swifts flying around. And it's still a vivid memory even now, 80 years later. They're just not there in the number.
In December 2021, swifts were added to the UK's Red List for bird species in most urgent need of our help.
Unless we do something, there won't be any anywhere.
Recent research suggests that changes in juvenile survival are the most likely driver of the swift's decline. But another possible reason is modern building design and the refurbishment of old buildings and barns, depriving swifts of important nest sites. In an attempt to save his beloved swifts, John took it upon himself to start making nest boxes for them to replace their homes that had vanished.
I've been known to be out there from 8 o'clock in the morning until 10 o'clock at night, making the swift boxes. I never had any intention of fully retiring, sitting down and watching television all the time. No, that's not for me. Nature's been very good to me all my life. And when I see it in the state that it is in now, I'm desperate to do something about it. And this is one way in which I can do a little bit towards it, particularly for the swifts.
Word soon got out, and orders for John's swift boxes started coming in thick and fast.
When I first started, I could make probably 3, and that would take me literally all day. Whereas now, if everything is being cut out, I could manage 35.
Thanks to John's work, there are now swift boxes adorning many homes across the UK. Swifts are gregarious, social birds, so installing multiple boxes encourages more of the colony to take up residence.
When I see a swift couple using it, I am particularly pleased about that. When I can actually say, if I hadn't have done that, would they still be nesting there, or would they have given up?
Since making his first box 15 years ago, John has single-handedly provided vital homes for over 30,000 pairs. That's over half of the UK's population of swifts.
Up to today, I've made 34,673 boxes.
Funnily enough, this hasn't gone unnoticed.
A gentleman called Chris Packham challenged me to get to 30,000 boxes. When I'd got the 30,000, he then said, we'd better make it 40,000. So, without thinking, I said, yeah, oh, well, OK, then we'll do 40. Leaves me about 5,500 to go.
You know, sometimes when we see a problem, we think, it's just too big for us to sort it out, us as individuals. We couldn't possibly have an impact. got to take a lesson from that gentleman. What a significant impact. You know, an enormous number of UK swifts nesting in boxes that he's made. You've got to salute him. He's an absolute legend.
34,673, and he's going to reach your challenge, I reckon.
I think he will, and if he doesn't, I'm going to have to turn up one Sunday morning and muck
Give
in.
him a hand, I think you will. Now, we've been at Arn for 3 weeks now. It's been a fabulous place to be, and it's famous for so many things. In particular, it's one of the few places in the UK that you could, if you're lucky, see all 6 native British species of reptile. Come on, name them 3 lizards.
Sand lizard, common lizard, slow worm.
OK, 3 snakes.
Smooth snake, adder, grass snake.
Exactly right. And if you remember back 3 weeks ago, I went in search of all 6. Wasn't lucky enough to see the adder. It escaped me. And in fact, it's been a bit elusive from our camera team as well. They have, however, seen this one, the grass snake. Great time to be out looking for British reptiles because it has been so hot. So highly likely, particularly if you're in Arn, you might see one basking in the sunshine. Large but harmless snake. Beautiful snake. You might not have ever seen a grass snake, but the one thing you'll know about snakes is they have very long, forked tongues. But why? All of them have it. That's our smooth snake. As Chris said, we've got our grass snake and our adder snake as well. But why? And it's a question that has puzzled people for many years. Think back to the 4th century BC, Chris.
Oh, yeah.
Aristotle invented scientific method of analysis, thought it would provide snakes with twofold pleasure from savours. In other words, doubling their sensation of taste.
Pretty good.
17th century Italian astronomer and naturalist Hodierne, I think that's how you pronounce it, suggested they use their forked tongue for picking dirt out of their nostrils. Nice idea, not correct. So, why do they have a forked tongue? Well, I think we might be able to
I'm going to demonstrate this with a model. Shall I go first?
Yeah, you go first.
I'll go first, OK. Right, here we go. It's another one of our elaborate contraptions here. So here we have the head of a grass snake, which we're going to use as a model. Michaela, would you peel off my face, please?
Oh, you mean the snake's face? OK,
Take
right,
the snake's
yes.
face off.
It's one of my favourite
And what I'm
things
going to do is I'm going to put my tongue through here and demonstrate how it works. Only my tongue would never be long enough, of course, would it? So I have another appendage which has been adapted. So here you've got to imagine that my arm is the tongue of the grass snake, and these, my 2 fingers, are the forked part of its tongue. So it's inside its mouth. It smells something that it's curious about, and at that point it averts its tongue out and wafts it, as we've seen, through the air like this. Each part of this bifid tongue, as we call it, is moist and captures chemical scents left by the things that it's interested in. So, Michaela, provide me with some chemical scent.
OK, this is chemical scent, and it's going on one of your forks.
OK, so it catches it on that fork. It then withdraws its tongue back into its head and pushes that tongue up into the roof of its mouth, where it inserts each part of the bifid tongue into something called a Jacobson's or vomeronasal nasal organ. And when it does this, it dissolves the scent in a liquid held in that gland, and that transmits the signals from the gland all the way up to the snake's brain so that they can be analysed. But why is it forked? Well, because it doesn't, oh dear, it doesn't just have it doesn't just have one of those glands, it actually has 2. So let's imagine that this is the side that's caught the scent. Mick, drop the scent into the vomeronasal gland.
I'm dropping the scent.
OK.
Just into one of the jars?
No, I'll drop this one into this one. Here we are.
So that's the scent. In it goes.
Right. And what you'll see here is that this here has more scent, and also in amongst there somewhere, if you can look carefully, you'll see this hint of prey.
There we go.
Basically, what's happening with this tongue when it's wafting through the air like this is if scent is blowing from this direction and it's captured on this part of the bifid tongue, then there's more of it here than there is on this one. And when it very rapidly withdraws it into its mouth, sticks it into its vomeronasal organ, that allows it to judge what distance and which direction the scent is coming from. So it's no different than us, if you like, having 2 eyes so that we can judge distance when we're looking at things, 2 ears, again, so that we can judge distance and direction, perception when it comes to sound, and indeed our own nostril, which should work, but it doesn't work quite as well as the snake. Although we do have a Jacobson organ, it's just a little bit diminished and not quite so sensitive.
I think that was rather fabulous, don't you? Did we see the prey though? Look, there's the prey, a little froglet down there in the jar. So
okay.
yes, okay. What
Yeah,
are you
no, I'm
doing
very
now?
happy
What are you
with my
doing?
tongue, yeah.
Are you
Okay.
chuffed?
I'm chuffed.
Are you chuffed?
I'm
with
chuffed
your tongue?
I'm chuffed with my
With your
tongue.
forked tongue. Okay. Talking of which, let's go to Gillian. I'll give you one guess what she's going to be talking about.
Well, yeah, a little bit of a clue there. But welcome back to South Stack on Anglesey Island. We've been talking about sea cliffs and seabirds, but there is one charismatic corvid, Chris and Michaela gave it away a bit there, that is very much at home in this coastal habitat, and that, of course, are choughs. They're brilliant birds, absolutely striking birds, a member of the crow family, the only one with a red bill and red legs, so you really can't miss them. But if you do, you usually do hear them as well. Before you see them, they tend to announce their arrival with this characteristic chiao call. Now they hug the coast, they stay close to the coast because they nest in crevices and in cracks on rocky ledges and on the cliffs here. And once they've found a good nesting site and bred successfully, they'll start to return to that same nesting site year on year. So they're very faithful to the nest sites that they establish and will return to the same area over time. So they're doing really, really well here. Now, the last counted, there are 13 nest sites at South Stack, and this year there are 12 of them that are active. So they're doing well, not just because of the nest site, but because of habitat as well. There's good foraging ground in this area as well. Now, they need a mosaic of patchy bracken and gorse and patches of open grassy areas, which they'll use to probe, and they'll use those long bills to probe into the ground. You can see this one here looking for a suitable, softer area, and it'll probe into the ground looking for things like leather jackets, so insect larvae, beetle larvae, and they'll pull those out with those bills. So just to give you an idea, because they have very particular requirements, what they need is these open patches of grass need to be a certain type of length. So what they'll need is something from about 5 centimeters to anything about 10 centimeters, anything more than that, and they start to find it difficult to get into that bed, then to the ground underneath there. And that open grassy areas tends to be kept open by grazing livestock. So it's partly to do with how these land and coastal areas are managed. Now, of course, they don't read the field notes, so there's a little bit of variation around the length of the grass. But like I said, because of all of this, they do really well. And they know they're doing well here because the choughs are doing well, they're long-lived. Typically, choughs will live to around 7 years, but the oldest chough that's been recorded here is a female that made it to 22 years, a female called Mrs. Mousetrap, and she has quite the story. Her story begins back in 2006 when she met a male, Mr. Mousetrap. So Mrs. and Mr. Mousetrap set up shop and they started to breed and they mated very successfully. Mr. Mousetrap was her half-brother from another father, but we're not going to get into that. They did well. They raised choughs, fledglings, you can see there, year on year until 2021 when Mrs. Mousetrap disappeared, presumed dead. Mr. Mousetrap was left all on his own, but not for long. He stayed on his own just for a few months until he met a new bird, a new Mrs. Mousetrap. And last summer they nested, they bred successfully, and they've done it again this year. And news is that their chicks have fledged just last week. And all of this is because there's some fantastic ringing work. So Mr. Mousetrap is still around. We see him around here. He's very vocal, foraging, but you can see those colour rings there on his legs. And that is part of a project called Cross and Stratford Welsh Chough Project. It's been running for about 30 years. It's a brilliant colour ringing project that allows the team to monitor the individuals, to identify the individuals and see where they range, how far they travel, who they mate with, and of course, you know, these sort of soap opera dramas that seem to unfold with Mr. and Mrs. Mousetrap. And he has become quite the character here. The visitors do enjoy seeing him. Like I said, he's very bold and he does seem to be out and about quite frequently. And of course, Mrs. Mousetrap, the new Mrs. Mousetrap, I should say, is also getting to become very familiar with this area. And all of this down to that colour ringing work. Megs, who would have thought that this kind of drama, these soap operas, unfold in the world of the chough?
It's amazing, isn't it? Because sometimes there are species that we get to know when we go to the cliff tops, but actually to get those intricate details is so fascinating, and we can learn so much from these animals, and well, we do really, don't we, all of the time. Now, earlier on, I gave you a little bit of a quiz to identify what sound this is. Have a listen again. It's a bit bizarre, isn't it? It's something I'd never heard before. But a few of you have already given in your answers. So somebody said it sounds a bit like a gannet, and I can definitely kind of see what you mean there. Somebody says it sounds like a grasshopper. Again, understand it's quite mechanical, isn't it? And then someone else said, and I've got no comment to this sounds like Chris rubbing his thighs. So we'll quickly brush over that one. The answer of what that sound was is a sand wasp. Now take a look at this. This is a fantastic species of solitary wasp. And it's reliant upon sandy soils for making burrows in which it lays its eggs. But the sound is spectacular. So what it's doing, we think, and there's two theories, is that it's vibrating its wings either to make the sand a little bit more loose and able to make the burrow a little bit deeper, or the other hypothesis is that it's getting soil and some stone in its kind of front legs and mandibles, and it's going down, and then it's vibrating its wings to make it a little bit more sturdy. So we don't know exactly why it does this, but this sound is so unique and bizarre. It really kind of caught me off guard. It's really, really quite cool. But there is another species I would love to introduce you to. It's called the Purbeck mason wasp, and it is very distinctive. It's got those orange legs and that ivory and black banding, and it's about 9 to 11 millimetres. Now this is a very rare species. It's endangered because it's a heathland specialist. It needs sandy ground, but also a little bit of clay and bell heather that emerges quite early in the season. And that's for nectar and also to help it with reproduction. Now, it's only really found around this area across the Isle of Purbeck, as its name suggests, the Purbeck mason wasp. And there is one man, Terry Bagley, who has gone out to photograph its entire life cycle. He's got some amazing images that he has been willing to share with us. This is the first photograph of a male. Now, they emerge in mid-June after their winter diapause, and the female emerges a few days after the male. There she is there, and she's straight to work making a burrow, and what you can see on the right-hand side is this kind of soil heap that she creates as she is excavating. Now, when she is finished making her burrow, she needs to make sure that when she lays her eggs, there is enough food, so when those eggs hatch, they've got something to nibble on before they then emerge as adults. So she goes out to the heather that I mentioned earlier, and she finds these heath button moth larvae in particular, sometimes gracefully and sometimes not so gracefully, putting them in her burrow head first, it seems. And these are found on the top of these kind of heather and gorse bushes, which makes them such a specialist. Now, about 12 to 20 of these different animals, of these larvae, can be put into a singular burrow. It's a parasitoid species, so essentially means that when those eggs hatch, what happens is the larvae come and they eat the non-essential organs of the larvae first, and then eventually get to the heart of the animal, eventually killing it before they then emerge as adult wasps themselves. But I would like to introduce you to another species. This is a spiny mason wasp. Now, it's much more common than the Purbeck mason wasp, and what you might notice is that it's making its burrows in a slightly different habitat. So it excavates in the sandbanks, but it does something very different. You can see it's orange and yellow and black coloration there. It looks very different. And what is really interesting is it makes these tunnels. Now, it uses these kind of clay sand to build it. Using those mandibles, it comes out, and these tunnels can be about 3 centimetres long. And in all honesty, we have no idea why they do this. There's a couple of theories. Could it be, for example, to stop water getting into the burrow where those important eggs are laid? Or could it be to stop parasites getting in? Who knows? It's one of nature's mysteries, and that's what makes it so enchanting and interesting to find out all of this really, really cool stuff. Now it's time to move away from these amazing solitary wasps, all the way to the land of the amphibians, where everything is absolutely wonderful.
As early spring hits, rising temperatures across the country trigger one of the most iconic spring events. Thousands of frogs leave their winter hibernation sites in places like disused mammal burrows, traveling back to their birth pool with one thing on their mind. time to find a mate. The males use a single vocal sac under the chin to fill the air with a croaking chorus. Each call traveling around 50 meters. The loudest and longest calls attract the female, and matches are made. Until very recently, it was thought that common frogs mated quite randomly. But research conducted this year has revealed hidden secrets. Male frogs have an area called a nuptial pad on their forelegs, which allows them to latch onto the female in a position called amplexus. But it seems their function is more than just practical. The new study has found that males with larger nuptial pads are more likely to win partners. So female common frogs are more discerning than we thought. For them, bigger really is better. After what can be 24 hours in amplexus, the female has laid around 2,000 eggs, which are fertilized by the male sperm. Once in water, the coating around the eggs swells to around 1 centimeter across, producing the familiar masses of frog spawn we all know. They've got a long way to go. Only 1 in 50 will survive to become adults. To maximize their chances, the embryos can develop quickly, taking part in a transformative dance, forming external gills and a mouth. And in just 2 weeks, the tadpole hatches. Little more than a mouth, gills, and a tail. At first, the tadpoles feed on frog spawn remains. After around a week, the tadpole is strong enough to swim and search for algae and small plants to eat. But their vegetarian diet doesn't last long. After a few weeks, their hind limbs begin to form and they develop teeth and turn carnivorous. Now they crave something more, eating insects and other less fortunate tadpoles. Around 12 weeks after hatching, the surviving tadpoles look like tiny frogs. The tail is reabsorbed by the tadpole and used as a source of protein, and the froglet emerges from the water. A dexterous feeding machine. It'll be between 2 and 3 years before they return to the water to breed. When this cycle starts all over again.
Tadpoles. Absolute trigger for nostalgia for me. Kneeling on the bed, glass jar on the windowsill, all those little tadpoles in it. Oh, joy.
It is one of those things that ignites wonder, isn't it, in kids? And so many kids do it when they're younger. If they could just capture that wonder and keep hold of it.
Oh, I know. I know. And we know how metamorphosis works. We just explained it, but it's nevertheless still miraculous
It's just
when you watch it.
extraordinary, isn't it? Do you know, one of the things that Chris and I have noticed since we've been here on Arm, that there seems to be a lack of insects this year. And in fact, we were in the foxgloves the other day.
Hardly
and
anything.
we only saw a couple of bees,
Yeah.
didn't we?
And I was running a moth trap a couple of weeks ago, caught 20 moths. Not 20 species, just 20 individuals on a fine night.
And how much do you expect to get?
Oh,
really?
just a few years ago, we were catching hundreds of individuals of about 40 species.
Well, it's certainly something that you've been noticing, and there's a lot of chat on Twitter noticing that there is a lack of invertebrates. Moths, butterflies, bees, insects. Now, we do know that there has been a massive decline of invertebrates in the last few decades, but is this year particularly bad? Well, we asked some of our partners, BTO, BugLife, Butterfly Conservation and Bumblebee Conservation Trust, and they said although there is anecdotal evidence, they haven't got enough data yet to really put a scientific judgment on that. But we do know that invertebrates are affected by weather, and certainly the weather in the last year has been extraordinary.
Yeah, let's just take one of those groups to look at to start with, our butterflies. They're very popular, noticeable insects, of course. What we've seen is that the multi-generational species, things like small tortoiseshell, red admirals, brimstone, peacock, last spring in 2022, they started strong. Then we had a drought and they finished badly because all of the food plant for their caterpillars shriveled up. And we've seen, again, a really poor spring from those insects this year, not surprisingly, because their caterpillars simply didn't make it through last summer. But what about those species which have single generations? Things like the browns and the blues, ringlets, here, common blue, silver-studded blue. Well, they're only just starting to emerge. So it remains to be seen whether the drought last year, or indeed even the drought that we're suffering at the moment this year, is having an impact. They may well be late because we had a very cold and wet spring here. But just like Michaela says, at the moment it's personal observations. It's my moths, it's your moths. We need to turn that into good science, and that means good citizen science projects.
But what about bees as well? As I say, lots of people are noticing that there aren't as many bees around, and the Bumblebee Conservation Trust has done a few surveys already. They've found that there are lower than average numbers, but not unprecedented. Slightly lower numbers in March. There was a big drop-off in May. And numbers of worker bees certainly are down, and obviously they're very important. And that is because of poor weather. We're now seeing more of them come out because the weather has improved. But as Chris says, what they need is data. So all of these partners need data, and they need you to go out and do citizen science. And there are plenty of surveys that you can get involved with, and information is on our website. But let me just say, it is just as important to give your results if you don't see anything as if you do. So do get involved and let them know if you've had a good day or a bad day.
Your tadpoles got me thinking, you know.
Oh, yeah?
Well, when you're young, you really take things for granted, don't you? Playing football after school, jumpers for goalposts, you know,
Yeah.
spangles, spangly birds,
Spangles.
starlings. Remember we took starlings for granted?
Yeah, I
Just
do,
don't
yeah.
see them now.
Yeah, we used to have loads of them in our garden.
Not now.
No, we certainly don't.
And there is one species which I see so infrequently now that I've almost forgotten it. But one turned up just a few miles away from where we're standing, and I couldn't resist an opportunity to go out and reacquaint myself with a lovely little bird. I've come to see a bird which I've very sadly forgotten. I've forgotten its call, forgotten its song. I've almost forgotten what it looks like. Because in the time between me first seeing one and now, it's declined by 92%. And I haven't seen one of these birds for 5 years at least. But there's one in this tree. Spotted flycatcher. You just see the crown of the female. It's the female that does the incubation. It's a sub-Saharan migrant, and some of these birds will go as far south in Africa as Namibia, 7,000 kilometres. These tiny little brown birds go that far and then return here to breed in the summer. But there's been a dearth of insects this year. Thankfully, there were quite a few flies, mosquitoes and midges buzzing around me now. She's just popped out. Oh, look at that. Lovely long wings, long tail, almost a little crest. And that wonderful black beady eye. I'd forgotten just how striking that little black eye is. They used to nest in my grandmother's garden, in the apple tree. And I remember sitting on her domed concrete path, picking off the moss, whilst the flycatchers would fly out of the apple tree and land on a wall. Honestly, I wasted spotted flycatchers. Just never paid them the attention they deserved. I was always after something bigger, more glamorous. I skipped past flycatcher in my bird book and headed straight to the eagle. If only I'd known. Now we've got white-tailed eagles flying around here and the spotted flycatchers have all but gone. It used to be called the Egypt bird because its call sounds like Egypt, 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 or the beam bird because it would perch on a beam and from there it would sally. It would fly up and snatch flies. They were named as a species in the 1770s. They're not really spotted, are they? They're streaked. If I could turn back time, I'd change their name to streaked flycatcher. But if I could turn back time with more purpose, I'd do something about their shocking decline. Loss of habitat, industrial farming, way too many agrochemicals. The enormous loss of insects is bound to hit the ultimate insectivorous passerine hard, and it has. And for all of the bad news about this species, here's some good. She's up there, she's got a nest, she's got some eggs. Let's just hope she adds something to this population of what is a very special and very underrated little bird.
As you say, Chris, we take so much for granted, don't we? I mean, you think how much wildlife in our lifetime has become rare, threatened and endangered. As the Joni Mitchell song goes, don't it always seem to go? You don't know what you've got till it's gone. And I think with that thought, hang on to it, catch it, think about it, as we enjoy today's mindfulness moment.
Bit of bliss.
Bit of bliss and a deep thought, I think.
Indeed. Another deep thought, though. Doesn't go so far back in time. 2016, we were at Minsmere, and we were really pleased to have a camera on a nest live for the very first time. It was a golden eagle's nest up in Scotland, and we watched the youngster developing there throughout the course of their series. And then I had the enormous privilege of going up to Scotland with a remarkable man, Dave Anderson, to actually go to the nest, to measure up the bird, get all the biometrics, put a ring on, and then critically also fit it with a satellite tracking device. Extraordinary piece of equipment which tells us everything that we need to know about these birds. Hopefully we'll be able to follow her up until the time she has her own chicks. What about that? That would be amazing.
Oh, it was so special, wasn't it? So special watching that chick. And on Autumn Watch, with the help of our audience, we chose a name for her and we called her Freya. So she was tagged, that was 7 years ago. And what we know is that, unfortunately, last year she had an unsuccessful breeding season. The good news, this year, she's had a chick. She's been successful. This is super exciting. There's that tiny little chick. Well, Dave Anderson has been following the chick and it's now 6 weeks old. It's in the mountains of Argyll on a nest. And hopefully, you said this weekend he hopes to tag it.
Yeah, if they can, they're going to go up there and put a tag on the youngster. So then we'll be able to follow that as well as the adult.
Second generation, and hopefully we'll be able to bring you news of that on Winter Watch.
Indeed. OK, time's running out. Let's take a last look around our live cameras. What have we got here? Right, OK, let's go dead centre. One of your favourites, Mick, the kestrels. They're in that box, all 5 of them. It's out in the sunshine. It's been sweaty and stinky in there today, but look at them.
Oh, no, I love this. I love this because, I mean, it has been hot and you just see them all peeking out of the box, willing their feathers to grow so they can fly out because apparently it really stinks in there. What about our osprey nest? We haven't checked in with them for the last few days. All 3 chicks there. Last time we left them, Chris, they were bickering quite a lot. There was a bit of concern about that. Don't want it to go the same way as the buzzard chick. But all looks good in the nest right now. They're both being fed by both adults. Look at that, being fed as we watch them live. What a very special nest that is.
OK, we're lapsing into a raptor roundup, so we can't possibly miss our goshawks. Let's go to the goshawks now. 3 young in the nest, as you know. They've been branching, spending a lot more time away from the nest structure itself, up in the trees. There we are, look at that. Preparing itself for a life of maximal predation.
Oh, that's fabulous,
oh, the
isn't it?
goshawk. So good, so good.
And don't forget, you can watch those cameras from 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. What else has been going on? Well, this will make you laugh. I hope this will bring a smile to your face. There's a herring gull minding its own business, and just keep your eyes on it. Look what's happened. Oh, a fish jump. Oh, my goodness, what happened there? It was just chaos in the water. Let's take that in slow motion. There we go. Fish jumps out, and a deer jumps behind it. How extraordinary is that?
Oh, it is extraordinary. Gullfish deer.
Gullfish deer.
Gullfish deer. It's a small town on the coast of Norway. Just before we go, take a look at these. John Hawkins, we've seen some of his photographs previously. He's good at flight stuff. Hobby, catching a dragonfly in flight. Presumably up in Surrey where he caught the others. Look at that.
Whoa.
Oh,
amazing photographs.
Great sequence of photos, great bird.
We've had some brilliant photographs from you. Thank you very much for all getting out and sending us what you've seen. Last show tomorrow, I know it goes too quickly, doesn't it? We will, of course, be doing a roundup of our nests for a final time, in particular, looking at those gorgeous kestrels in the box. They won't be fledging tomorrow, but no doubt they'll be giving us some entertainment.
And I'll be looking at a really special relationship involving the silver-studded blue.
And I'll be hearing from a dedicated botanist whose life's work is saving rare plants from extinction.
So there we have it. We've just got 24 hours left to look at those live nests. They'll be on until 10 o'clock tonight, but on again tomorrow morning at 10. So keep your eyes. The cuckoo might go back to its nest. The goshawks might disappear. Who knows what will happen? We'll be back at 1 o'clock for Watch Out with Hannah Stitful. It's a great tip playoff between Michaela, Megan and myself to see who takes that trophy home. But I urge you now to go to BBC TikTok, where Jack Badams, one of our brilliant researchers, will be answering all of your questions. So TikTok now, Watch Out tomorrow at 1. We'll be back at 8 o'clock tomorrow night for the final episode of Springwatch 2023.
See you then. Bye-bye.
What can we do to help nature and the environment? Well, sometimes big changes come from little actions. The Open University is exploring how simple and effective measures can make a big difference. To get inspired, visit bbc.co.uk/Springwatch and follow the links to the Open University.